Welcome back, guys. This is the K&A podcast. I am Adrian Checo. I'm your host, and I'm joined with my co-host, Kenny.
Gotta say the government because it's formal.
Because it's formal. You know? You gotta be formal. Anyway, today we got our first female guest. It's my cousin Arlet. She is a teacher.
Hello. What's up, guys? How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
How you doing?
How you feeling?
I'm good. I wasn't nervous until now. I was like, oh, I got this in the bag. It's cool. But now I'm like, wait a minute. This is actually real. But I'm happy to be here anyways. So
that's good.
Thank you.
You want to tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I got to look at the camera.
No, you don't have to. You don't have to.
So I am basically from Brooklyn. I am 29, 6 months from 30. Mm-hmm. All right, that's a great thing. I grew up in Sunset Park, first 8 years of my life. Then we moved over here to East New York, and then we lived there for like 18 years, and now I'm a Long Island girl, not really. But I was previously a teacher, right? I started teaching since I was 20. I started as a TA. I was a substitute teacher. I was a para. I did all the things in education. And lastly, I was a full-time teacher, 6th grade, here in the same neighborhood. And I'm also a trainer. So that's a little bit about me.
What got you into like wanting to be a teacher?
To be honest with you, I was always tutoring in high school. I was like my friend's tutor. Mm-hmm. And everybody would come to me for like help. Like, oh, can you help me with this? And then I ended up doing like little tutoring sessions. And when I got to college, I was like, oh, I could just, teach. My first major was math education, which was crazy because I didn't know what it meant to be a math major. Mm. And then I started taking all these computer science classes, and I actually failed one. I failed one because it was at 8 a.m. and it was on the other side of Brooklyn, right, in Flatbush. I went to Brooklyn College. So traveling from East New York to Brooklyn College was like an hour and a half at least on the train. I had my gym bag, my backpack, my lunch. It was like the bag lady times 10. And I remember that I was also working at a restaurant called Havana. Oh, you used to work at Havana.
Yes, sir.
So when I was working there, I would get home late, and then I had this class I had to be on the train for at 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't even sleeping. And I remember it was like the worst experience, and it was a basic computer science. It was intro to computer science, and it was me and another girl. Mm-hmm. Everybody else, males. It was just, it was terrible. They weren't helpful. I would ask for help, and these nerds, I would call them nerds, they were like, no. Like, they just didn't want to help. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I failed that class, and I realized, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to do this math major. Screw that. And I became a bilingual ed major, which I graduated in with my bachelor's. And then I went on to get my master's in math education K through 6, which I did well on. And then I recently finished my second master's in leadership education.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So all education. I'm not even like, maybe I'll use it one day. I don't know. But that's basically my history with schooling. And that's why I became a teacher.
How many years did you go through to get all your master's and bachelor's and stuff?
I didn't take a break. So I started in 2013 and I finished in 2020 with my first master's. Mm-hmm. Then I did take a year after my first master's. And I did an online program, just 16 months straight. And I finished in April. Yeah, so it basically took me like, I want to say 7, 8 years.
What is the job that kept you going through all that? Because I know people that graduate high school like to take a gap year just to go to college and just finish 4 years. So I could imagine 7.
The jive? You want to talk about a jive? Older Dominican parents telling you you better finish. No. My parents were actually like, I did feel some kind of pressure from them, because at the end of the day, they are your parents, and they're always gonna try to guide you to the best of their abilities to what they know. But I was also raised with the idea that, you start something, you finish it.
Yeah.
It's not exactly something I fully believe in now, knowing what I know now. But at the moment, I was like, man, I gotta finish. I gotta do this so I could get here, 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 and here. And so I always had a plan. I'm always like planning things. And so I feel like always having a plan for something was what always had me going. So unless I got to that goal, I was not stopping. And I feel like that's kind of like my personality, and it has always been my personality, on top of my parents, like, finish school, so I think that's what kept me going for the most part, is having them as a guidance, and then also having the personality that I have as a result of how they raised me and like who I am as a person. Yeah. So not that it's always been easy, but it's like you get to the point where you're like, okay, what's the next thing? What can we do next? What's the solution? Like, it's always like, my mind has always been on like, okay, how do we get this done? And not really like sit in the, oh my gosh, I'm not where I want to be, but what can we do to get there? Right? Like finding solutions. So that's how I've always kind of gotten through life, is keeping that momentum going. Yeah.
So you said you start something, you don't finish it. So what goal did you set when you was going into being a young teacher?
My goal was, at the time, that I wanted to be a math teacher. I love math. I'm like such a nerd. I've always been like the A's in math, always. And I kind of owe that to my mom, because I remember, oh my goodness, every day coming home from school, we had to practice the timetables like for an hour after school. But besides the point, I lost track.
What goal you set for yourself coming in as a young teacher?
As a young teacher, I always wanted to I wanted to be a different teacher, in the sense that, like, I'm not very traditional in the classroom. Like, I'm very winging it. I wing it. That's always been my teaching style. And so I always feel like I wanted to translate my personality into the classroom, because I feel like in education, a lot of teachers, they don't do that. I feel like one of the reasons why a lot of kids, especially nowadays, don't connect with the adults in the room is because the adults are putting up like this barrier. Like they're pretending to be somebody that they're not. Because, and I understand why, because of all the things, all the pressures that we have. But kids see that. Kids are like the realest as they come. They are the most honest. They see right through you. And so my goal as a teacher, especially working in this neighborhood, because I worked in Franklin K. Lane, I worked in 171. I was a sub like in East New York for a long time. So my goal was always to like bring some kind of like personality that they can connect with. And I feel like I've been super successful with that. Only because I've kept it real, right? Like, I've always been very transparent with the kids. And so I feel like that has gotten me so far in the education world and in the school environment. I've never really had situations where like a student hated me. Like, yeah, kids have attitudes. You deal with it. That, you understand that going into this profession.
Yeah, it comes with it.
So my goal was always to be that person that they can like connect with. And working here is great because I got to work with my culture. I got to connect with a lot of people. And it's been great. Yeah.
That's good, because I mean, a lot of the times, like, when you remember teachers, is be the ones that you can connect with the most.
Yeah.
Like, I remember 3 teachers out of just high school, and that's just because they would always step out of their way just to make sure I was good, make sure I'm learning. It'd be the teachers that don't care, that just hand you a slip, here, read it, come back, take a test.
It makes a difference. Like I always, it's funny because I work at the middle school that I used to go to. Mm-hmm. And the majority of my coworkers were my teachers when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And we constantly have that conversation. I'm like, you know what? Like I loved high school, but middle school, oh man, I love middle school. I literally, all my best memories are from middle school.
Yeah.
Right? And I always tell them that. I'm like, you guys, like I loved it here. Like I just felt like the connection was different in high school than it was in middle school. And a lot of that is because, you know, the kids are older. A lot of high school teachers don't care at that point. Like you either do what you got to do or you fail. Mm-hmm. But when you're working in like that lower level, you build a bigger bond with those kids. And I feel like that's also why I chose middle school, because I did teach at the high school level. I taught kindergarten. I taught like all the elementary levels. I was like, no, middle school is like my place because I can be myself. Right. So, I feel like the most memorable moments for me were middle school because of the teachers. Mm-hmm. And so I always remember that. And I'm like, I want to be that person. I want to be that person that like the kids come back and be like, oh, Ms. Duran, like, remember this, and that. And I'm like, yeah, actually, because I do the same thing with my coworkers. Mm-hmm. It's funny because I was always on top of my work. Right. Mm-hmm. And I had no choice because the fear was instilled in us growing up. But I remember I had this one teacher, Miss Watson was her name, science teacher. We worked together my first year at 171. Oh, yeah, my first and second year. And she would always say, Arlet, you're going to see what you put me through. And I'm like, because I used to talk in her class. I was terrible at science. I hated science, and it wasn't because of her, but it was just me not being good at it. And so I would just talk in her class all the time. And she's like, remember when I used to have to call your mom to tell her that you would just talk in my class? I'm like, yeah, I feel it. I'm sorry. I get it now. But yeah, overall, like I always, my first priority was to reach them in a non-academic way, right? Because academics will come, right? They'll learn. They will always learn something. They're always going to leave with a few things from the school year. But a lot of these kids don't have like that attention at home. They go home to like an empty house because a lot of the times parents are working all day, especially now, and in this economy, and like depending on the environment and the neighborhood you work in, you know, these kids, they have to fend for themselves. They become adults ante de tiempo, like before they even have to. Like they don't get to live their childhood completely. So I always made sure that I was like that person that they can come to, they can confide in, they can trust, they can speak to. And I feel like that has made me a successful teacher. Yeah.
So what was the difference? Because you said you taught high school, kindergarten, and sixth grade.
Yeah, I've been all over. The difference in like the dynamic of everything. High school was good. And I loved my experience at the high school level because I was teaching math. And when I was teaching math, I was in the zone. Like I also I didn't follow a lot of the things that they asked me to do. Like I said, I wing everything. In school, like I would get to school the morning of and plan my lessons for the day. Like I always felt that those lessons were better because I was just like, oh, let's do this, let's do that. Like it's just, if I plan too much for something, it's disastrous. So
sound like him.
Me?
That sounds like you.
I just be winging it.
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of the times when you think something too deeply, you end up like messing it up.
Exactly. You know what it is?
Yeah.
I get anxious if I think too much about it.
Right.
So if I just do it, it's like I'm already in the moment. So like I have no choice but to act on it.
Yeah, no, that I feel the same. I feel like that was one of my things as a teacher too. Like I'm planning morning of, and sometimes I would go home and do some work, but I got to the point where I was like, nah, I'm not doing this. This is too much. And the high school level, I had so much fun teaching math, and the kids were assholes, but I was like, I didn't even like pay attention to that, because sometimes I would get on their level and I'm like, okay, let's go. Like, I could do this too. I could do this all day. And sometimes you got to know your audience. Like, I was at Franklin K. Lane. It's not the easiest school environment. Everybody knows that that's one of the worst schools in this neighborhood. I understand why. But the kids, like, I love them regardless. I remember my first year. Oh, Lord. I taught summer school. I had like 50 kids, almost 50 kids in a classroom. And this was the first time that I was teaching math in Spanish, because these were newcomers. These kids were, almost all of them were from DR. Didn't have not even a month or two in the country. And I was expected to teach them algebra. Some of these kids didn't even know how to add and subtract.
At Franklin K. Lane or
at Lane?
Oh,
because they're coming from, some of them came from interrupted education and didn't know what was going on. So it was very funny, because I was teaching them something that was foreign to them, and then math and Spanish at the time was a completely different world. So the kids were teaching me Spanish in that context, and then I was teaching them like what they had to know, and it was kind of funny. But they became my favorite group, and they were my worst behaved group. Right after that, I had great classes, but that first class, oh my goodness, they put me through the ringer, and I will always say that was my favorite group.
Did you ever doubt yourself? Because it's like,
oh yeah,
you were like, oh, I don't really know how to explain this to them,
oh,
but I'm just thrown in the fire.
I would spend hours like on Google, YouTube, like figuring out how to explain like a concept that I knew very well but didn't know how to explain it in Spanish. But that experience really, like, it was a do or die for me. It was a do or die experience, because now I feel like my Spanish just like it got so much better after that. I didn't have, nobody helped me with that. I had to fight to literally just stay afloat. And it was one of the experiences that shaped me. So that's why I loved working at the high school. And then elementary, too much babysitting. Like, they're too dependent on you, too much crying. Cute as kids. But I was like, nah, this is not for me. And then middle school, you kind of get like the best of both worlds. Like, you have the kids that are independent enough that you could just send them off, and then they're still very impressionable. So like, they still look at you like, wow, like this person is instilling so much wisdom, and they still respect you. High schoolers, they don't care. They will curse at you. They will do all the things that you can name under the sun. But I feel like middle school is the perfect like middle ground for, I mean, at least in my opinion. Everybody thinks middle school is crazy, which they are. They're insane. But personally, I feel like I had finally found like that space that I can connect more with.
Do you feel like that connection, like between student and like professor teachers, lost entirely in college?
It depends. It depends where you put yourself, because you, as an adult, like as a college student, you're at least 18 years old. You get to school and you're 18, right? At that point, you are responsible for making the best out of your situation, right? So I honestly, like, I had a great experience in college where I found a home in like I was in the Puerto Rican Latino Studies department, and I met all these great professors. Like, it was the first time that I felt like I was home at Brooklyn College. And I chose to do that because I knew, I was like, oh, I'm going to find people in this department that I'm going to be able to connect with. And I had so many different opportunities come from that. So I always say, like, yeah, it does get a little bit lost in translation, like when you get to college, because everything is very like gray, right? Like, you're trying to figure yourself out. These adults, they don't care if you figure it out. They're just there to do their job. They're there to teach a class, and then that's it. You go your way, and they go their way, and they keep teaching you, and you keep going, and you keep taking like whatever classes it is that you're taking. But it got to a point where I changed my major. I want to say it was my second semester of the third year. I changed my major knowing that I was going to extend the time of me being there. And I didn't knowing that I was going to be happier, because I wasn't happy as a math major. And then when I found the Puerto Rican Latino Studies department, which was connected with the bilingual education department, that was it. That changed my whole college experience for me. And that happened late. That happened 3 years in. Mm-hmm. And I thought I was crazy. I was like, oh, I'm 3 years in and I'm going to change my major. But I want to say that was the first time that I made like a sacrifice academically. Because I knew I was going to get questions. And my mom did ask me one day, she was like, when are you going to graduate? I was like, oh, I'm just taking some extra classes. But I never fully explained to them what I did. Mm-hmm. They also don't know that I failed the class in college. Oh my God. And it's okay. Like, I see it now and I look back and I'm like, I needed to go through that. Mm-hmm. Because had I just gone through doing like the first major, I probably would have been miserable and I probably wouldn't have been like in the position that I am in today. So that was a very crazy time, because I also still had that pressure of graduating, and thank God that I did. But that was for me that moment where I knew I was responsible for creating my experience. Nobody else is responsible. Like, at that point, that's it. This is all you. Like, you better figure it out. It's not high school anymore. You don't have these teachers. You have professors that literally have their own things going on. Everybody's an adult. Everybody has a life that they're trying to survive. And so that really shaped the rest of my life, I would say, because I was like, I'm responsible for creating what I want, for creating that space. And I did that. And I was proud of myself. I was like, okay, what's next? Let's go. Like, what else can I do? So I feel like we tend to limit ourselves in like what we're capable of. And usually that's because of fear. And I always say, lead with faith, because, that's the only way that you're gonna be able to just like keep going and, stay away from the distractions and the things that are scaring you,
Alrighty. So what was the DOE like when you entered? And can you share what it was like when you first joined and how it changed over the years?
Well, right off the bat, I could say that my experience changed because I went from having not many responsibilities to having way too many responsibilities. Because that switch, when you go from like substitute teacher to full-time teacher, it's a big change. And I miss the sub life. I'm like, substitute teachers have the best life. I swear, you make your own schedule. You work wherever. You don't got to plan. Oh my God, you don't got to teach. And I would say that I had more fun when I started than my recent experience, which was the last school year.
Like as a sub, or just like when you started as a full-time teacher to compare to like at the end of that?
I'm talking about like my first experience in the DOE. So I was a TA, I was a sub, and I was teaching. I would say I was teaching full time. Like, I was teaching full classes by myself as a sub, because you could do that. They can like put you in positions where like there's a vacancy or something and you got to take over. So I loved it. I loved it and I was having fun. But as a sub, you're not expected to have the same, you don't have the same expectations as a full-time teacher. And it's harder as a full-time teacher because you're like, you feel like you know what you're doing and you feel like what you're doing is right. But then, here comes the politics of it all, and then like you're being told no, you can't do that, or you got to move faster, or you got to do this, you got to do that, and it's like you're constantly being added onto all these other responsibilities when you haven't even finished the other load of responsibilities that you have to do. And most of the time it's not even important. It's like BS, and has nothing to do with the kids, has nothing to do with their progression. At the end of the day, it's just like tedious paperwork, and you don't really get to master what you do in the classroom. And that's how I've been feeling for like the last 3 years. I feel like I haven't really been able to really focus on what the kids need. Instead, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, how they say. Like, I'm literally just doing what I'm told. And that's, for me, I can't live with that. Because that's not who I am. My personality does not reflect that. And it doesn't match up with that reality. And so, for me, it's just, I don't know. Like, I don't know how people do it. I don't know how people have done it for like 30 years. That is insane to me. And I feel like it comes at a cost of your well-being, your mental health, your emotional health. Everything is literally put on the line for this job. So compared to when I first started to now, a completely different story. Like, I loved it then and I hate it now. So
Do you feel like it changed for the better, or do you think it got worse?
it's definitely getting worse. It's getting worse because, politics at the end of the day, they see kids as like dollar signs. They don't really see them as humans. And I feel like that's what the DOE does. It dehumanizes the students, and not just them, but the teachers too. Because at the end of the day, like, if something goes right, we're responsible. But if something goes wrong, we're also responsible. We're like solely responsible for how we mold these students and how we kiss ass at the same time to admin, the district, like everybody. So for me, it doesn't go together. You don't say, oh, for the kids, and then turn around and make our lives a living hell. So it's kind of hard to be there for them when you're trying to be there for yourself. And I found myself constantly taking days off because I wasn't okay. If I'm not okay, how am I supposed to lead a class of 30 kids, right? Because it doesn't matter what you're going through. When you show up and you're present and you're in front of those kids, it's not about you anymore. It's about them. It's kind of like being a parent, right? Like, once you have kids, it's not about you anymore. It's about them for the rest of your life. And I don't have kids, but that's what I imagine it's like. So I feel like the DOE really, I want to say they took my passion for teaching away from me, because I loved it. I love instilling knowledge and teaching to everybody. It's not just kids. Like, I love speaking to people and I love learning from people the same way that I teach people. But I feel like they literally took that away from me, like that passion to teach kids, because it's not the way that I've felt, especially in the last year, that a lot of people do know. I don't really talk about it because I feel like people go through stuff. Everybody's going through things. Why am I going to add on to everybody's stress? But it was a tough year. And I feel like this last school year was the year that showed me, like, okay, Arlet, you got to put yourself first. Like, yeah, it's secure. Yeah, you get benefits. Yeah, like, it's a city job. Yeah, whatever. But at the end of the day, at what cost? So I would say that I lost my passion for it, basically.
Do you feel like they kind of did you ever get like in trouble for teaching the way that you teach? Because you say that you wing it most of the time. You don't really follow a lot of the things that they tell you to do. Have you gotten in trouble?
I wouldn't say I've gotten in trouble. It'll be like little things here and there, because one thing about the DOE and maybe other school systems as well is that everything is a show, right? So the classroom has to look a certain way. You have to have certain things on your board in case somebody walks in. Doesn't matter if it's relevant. No, just have it up because that's what the district wants, right? There have been moments where, like, if I get observed randomly, I'll just switch up to the way that they want me to teach. And then when they leave, I just go back to whatever I was doing, because I know what the kids need. You're not in here with me. You're not in the classroom with me all day. You don't see and hear what I'm experiencing. And so it's not fair for an outsider to come in and be like, oh, you're not doing this right. And I'm like, but you don't know who I have in here. Like, come and, live a day in my shoes so you can see what it is that I'm dealing with. Because right now, like, especially like with the increase in immigration, we're getting a lot of newcomers. A lot of these kids have gone through traumas coming here. A lot of these kids come from interrupted education, like I mentioned earlier. They don't know the basics. And so they're coming into a system that is assuming that they have, for example, I teach 6th grade, is assuming that they have a basic education level of a 5th grader, right? At least. And so the reality is that a lot of these kids come into the school system as a 6th grader, from my perspective, on a kindergarten level, 1st grade level. And we have data that shows that. Like, all my kids were on a kindergarten level.
In 6th grade.
In 6th grade.
Jeez.
And so I'm still expected to teach at least on a 6th grade level to all of these kids, right? I'm not talking about 1 or 2. It's almost like across the board, right? This is the dilemma that the city is facing right now. And I feel like they're not taking the measures that they need to take in order to, like, really, like, hone in on the problem. And my perspective, they don't want to, because they can. I feel like we know what we have to do, but at the end of the day, it's politics. It's about money, and it's about politics. And I can't do that. And I know that in every single career, there is a negative, there is a bad side, there has its pros and cons. However, this is something that does not sit right with me, like, internally. And so, that's why I've decided that this is not for me anymore. I can't continue to put myself in a position where myself is being sacrificed, and everything else is fine. No. Like, I also have to think about my family. I live with my parents. My parents are older. They need somebody there, right, to help them. If I'm not okay, I can't be there for them, which I found myself many times not being able to be there for them because I wasn't okay, right? And that's not even something that I've spoken to them about, because at the end of the day, I have to be responsible for getting myself out of situations, because mom and dad are not going to be there all the time. And so I've taken it upon myself to, like, push through and try to figure it out for their sake, for my sake, and for my loved ones at the end of the day. And we forget that, like, we want to be there for them, but we cannot be there for them if we're not there for ourselves at the end of the day, right? So, yeah, that it gets deep. I feel like I've become such a different person, like, in a good way and a bad way, because of this career. And for me, and when I accepted that, I was like, okay, it's time to make a change. I cannot continue doing this. Yeah.
Was there a specific... My fault. You go.
No, go ahead.
Was there a specific moment where it was like a specific moment where you remember that it's like, okay, after this, I know I'm done.
Literally what I was just about to say. Literally.
That's easy. I had when was it? Literally in October, right? So the school year starts in September. October, that's when I started to feel like, and I don't know if this is what it was, but it felt like a depression. And especially growing up in as a Latina, you don't really talk about depression, right?
Because it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, right? And I was like, yo, what is this? Like, why am I feeling so low? Why am I? Because that's not my personality. Like, everybody knows me, that I'm always, like, on 1,000. I'm energetic. I'm happy. And then I found myself, like, slowly, like, being really sad every day. And it got so bad that it physically hurt to wake up to go to work, right? And I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning to get to work, right, early, because I was planning in the morning. And, the wake up is whatever. I will wake up early for anything. But when I realized that I was not a morning person anymore, I was like, wait a minute, this is not me. Like, I know that I'm always, like, up in the morning getting ready to just, get ahead of the day. And ever since October, I want to say from October to literally the last day of school, I spent the whole, what is that, like 9 months? I spent those 9 months feeling this depression, right? In waves, because I did have high days. I had great days where like I was good. I was like, yo, I'm ready. I work out. Like the working out also, like, I think was the medicine that I needed to get through the school year, because there were moments where like I couldn't move, and the minute I did, I was good again. But it was a cycle. It was like I'd be high and then low. It was a full on roller coaster of emotions. So I want to say that October, legit, and it's crazy because you think about it, the school year just started. You got a whole 9 months to go, and the fact that I'm feeling like this right now, I'm like, damn, like, should I quit? I almost quit before Christmas. I almost quit because it was just, you got the winter blues, you got this going on. Everything was just in turmoil in my mind, right? And only a select few people knew. But I also, like, I was also getting therapy, which also helped me get through, like, the weeks. It was just, that was the moment that I was like, yeah, this is not for me. And I feel like I kept ignoring the signs, because I was like, no, like, first year full time, it was a disaster. And I was like, no, it's the first year, it's fine, I'm gonna get through it. Second year, it was a little better, but I still felt like something was missing. Then the third year came, and I was like, yeah, it's time to go. So
do you feel like it translated, like, into the classroom? Like, you wasn't able to connect with your students as well?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like, your whole mood was just changed?
There were days where I felt so bad because I would yell at them for no reason. I was like, and I would think about it like 2 minutes later, and I'll be like, oh my God, should I apologize? Should I say this? And I'm like, no, stand your ground. Just don't let them think that you made a mistake. Which was like, one of the things that I was really good at was owning when I made a mistake. But when it came to that, like, me realizing that I was acting on my emotions instead, I was like, no, I can't let them see that. I can't let them see that I'm having a weak moment. So there were days where, I either started my day off in tears, right? 8 o'clock was almost coming. I had to get it together. I had to wash my face. That's it. No more crying. Like, I had to get through it. But there were days where, like, weeks where I would start my days off in tears, literally. Driving on the Bell Parkway, dealing with traffic, crying like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then I would just have to get it together. And life goes on. And then I felt like it did translate throughout the day. Like, those feelings of being low would just, I couldn't be like happy Miss Duran that I was all the time. I had to be like the meanest teacher. The thing I will say is that I was able to identify it, and I was like, okay, Arlet, you gotta, like, separate the two, because you're just gonna drown. And at the end of the day, like, I don't want them to have that experience. Like I said, I want to be that person that they can remember that changed their life, right? As a newcomer, those first teachers that you get, like, those are the teachers that you will remember for the rest of your life. And so, yeah, I will say yes, it very much so translated throughout the day and into my teaching.
But do you feel like most of that stemmed from, like, COVID? Because I know from that, did you switch immediately to remote learning?
I remember that year that we closed down, I was still a sub. So we shut down in March. We had a 2-week shutdown. We didn't work for those 2 weeks, and then we went back remote. Right? So we taught online straight until June. So I didn't get to see those kids, and I was a sub at the moment. I was filling a vacancy. So I was like a full-time teacher, but my title was a sub. And then there was a freeze in the DOE. A freeze is when they are not hiring, right? And I was freaking out. And I was like, oh my God, I need a job for September. Like, I need to get paid. I don't know what I'm going to do. And the first opportunity was a kindergarten position that I got full-time out in Flatbush. Ya tu sabe, from East New York to Flatbush, it was hell. And I took it, and I was like, because I need a job. And I hadn't stopped work. I started working at 18, and at the time, I was maybe 23. No, I was 24, something like that. And I needed a job, and I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be jobless. And so I took it. That was my first experience teaching kindergarten, and that was bad. It was bad. I loved them. They were the cutest little kids I ever got to teach, and it was amazing. But it was a lot of babysitting, and I felt like I was babysitting. I didn't feel like I was teaching. And so the thing about COVID is that first year, right, that September, the schools had this rule that if there was maybe 1 or 2 COVID cases, we had to shut down for 2 weeks, which happened. We had kids with COVID. So we would shut down for 2 weeks, come back to school for a month, shut down again for 2 weeks. So imagine like 6-year-olds. 6-year-olds, they need they need patterns. They need consistency. A routine. Every single time we would go back in person, it was like the first day of school. It was like September all over again. And then forget about the Zoom. Oh my gosh. Between dealing with the parents, right? Because they were working from home. And now they had an additional job, which was to get their kid on Zoom and help them do their work. So I was dealing with frustrated parents. And I was also dealing with kids crying on Zoom. I was dealing with kids crying when they came back because they got so accustomed to being home again that they were like, we don't want to be in school anymore. And so it was hard adjusting to that emotionally, because I'm like, yo, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this constant change. So after that school year ended, I was also in the worst physical shape of my life. I wasn't working out. I wasn't fitness was in the back of my mind. And I remember that summer after that first year, I was moving my car on Nichols, and I saw one of the APs from 171, and she used to be my 6th grade teacher. And she was like, oh my God, Arlet, how are you? Whatever. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm looking for parking. I'm like, oh, I'm moving my car. Here, take my spot. And so we started talking about what I was doing, and I told her, I was like, honestly, I'm looking for another job because I can't teach kindergarten anymore. She was like, give me your resume. And I got an interview, and I got the position at 171, and that's how I moved from Flatbush to middle school. And that's I was crazy. So happy because I was right next to my house. So that was I feel like I did get the signs that first year that this wasn't for me. But I was like, nah, I'm going to just keep going. Because at the end of the day, my personality, you start something, you go through it, and you just get it done. So that was that. That was my first, that year was my first full year as a teacher.
Do you think the DOE set up kids properly during COVID? When everything shut down, and there are certain kids that come from different ethnic backgrounds that can't afford a laptop, can't afford to, get on Zoom and stuff like that because they don't have the necessary tools for it. Do you think the DOE set them up properly?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The DOE never does anything right. So it was, I will say it was a confusing time. I remember that I was told that if the kids did at least one assignment, they passed.
Just one.
Just one.
Throughout the whole year.
Throughout that COVID year. From March, from when they shut down to June, if they did one assignment, great.
Done properly or just done in general?
Just submitted, right? They would pass because they also were taking into account that a lot of families didn't have things like internet, devices. Like a lot of families were going through deaths, right? Because at that moment, the death count was crazy. Like people were losing family members. So I feel like that was a way to alleviate the stress of doing remote learning. But it's just like, I feel like even after that, knowing what happened and experiencing, not a lot of things were improved anyhow. So with the exception of that COVID year, I feel like things could be better. Yeah, but honestly, that COVID year just highlighted all the things that were wrong with the system. And like I said, it just gets ignored. So
if you could, like, let's say they gave you a position and be like, oh, you can make significant change in it. What do you think the DOE could have done differently during that moment?
During the COVID year? Honestly,
COVID year and moving forward to right now.
I can't speak to that first COVID year because knowing how everything was set up, it couldn't have, I don't know. There were so many things that I feel like could have happened differently. For example, like the guidance that teachers were being given, it was very confusing. I was confused as to how I was supposed to deliver instruction. I was confused as to how I was supposed to have expectations. I was confused as to how how to grade, right? Because what are we supposed to do? And things have to be on paper at the end of the day. So it was just a very confusing time for me. However, the following years, I feel like things could have been changed, like curriculum wise, because I feel like COVID did highlight how low our kids are in the city. And I feel like they're not focusing on the right things academically, and it's unfortunate because it's at the cost of the students. So I feel like if there's anything I would change is the curriculum that is being used currently in the whole city. It's not just here. It's not just in like Queens. No, it's like citywide. So I would change what they're learning because I feel like, especially with COVID, that was such a good opportunity to teach like about what's going on in the world, and we don't really have the time for that. Like, oh yeah, this is what COVID is. Boom, on to the next. But if anything, it highlighted for me what really needs change, and that's what the kids are learning.
So I feel like after COVID, mentally, at least for me, I wasn't even fully there. So, and I was already finishing like college at that point. So I could already imagine how it is for like middle schoolers, high schoolers. What mental toll do you think that COVID switch just for remote learning took on to all of them? And especially how it is moving forward?
It definitely removed like the whole social aspect of things. These kids weren't able to see their friends. They weren't interacting with other humans, especially with all the restrictions. And I feel like everything was very fear-based. Like people thought that even if you stepped outside, you would get COVID. And so a lot of these kids they didn't get to leave their houses. And I feel like that was the number one thing that affected the kids the most was, the social component of life. Like we're humans and we're supposed to interact with other humans. And so having that taken away was a huge toll, because when we went back in September, these kids were mute. Like you would ask them a question and they would look at you like you had 10 heads, or you would ask them to like share something with another kid, and it was like pulling teeth. And so it really affected them in all the ways because they couldn't interact. And so the social aspect is one of them. Then you got the academic, right? Because they, especially the younger kids that lost like the basic skills that they needed, like literacy, math, all that stuff that they needed once they went back to school, they didn't have that. And so I feel like that's when things started to get worse because they were already bad. Pre-COVID, everything was bad. Post-COVID, worse. Like it just heightened what was really happening in the education system. So we got academics, we got the social interactions, the lack of, and that it's a domino effect. And you know, I'm done blaming COVID for things because, like I said, COVID was just an opportunity for us to see what is happening, you know, inside. And that's it. COVID is done. And people constantly still blame COVID for what's going on now. I'm like, no, you're just continuing what was already happening. And so I would say the most important was the social interactions, how they weren't allowed to have any. And I was finishing my master's. I was in my last semester.
While also teaching?
Yeah. So, I always went to school and worked at the same time. I never really did either separately. And I remember that I had like 3 papers that I hadn't submitted because of the remote learning. It was so much work. It was like, I was like, nah, there's no way. Like, I want to be back in the school so bad. And then at the same time, my dad, it was me and my dad mostly because my mom was working at, she works at a hospital. And there were days where like she would just have to stay overnight because it was so crazy that they needed like extra hands. And so a lot of the times it was just me and my dad. And I'd be teaching on the computer, right? And he'd be in the back like slamming pots and pans. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, I need to work. And so it also affected the dynamic at home because I'm like, you need to be quiet so I can work. And it was just so crazy. And I wasn't all in it. I wasn't doing well in my program. Thank God that he gave us all extensions for all the papers. And I was like, doing all my papers. And I got it in and I finished. So I will say COVID kind of saved my semester.
Yo, COVID saved me, man, because remote learning, I got that. I got it set up and I'm playing the game in the background every time. I'm not even joking.
Yeah, so it definitely affected the mental health of everybody. So again, highlighting how important mental health is. So I feel like COVID was just that. COVID was that moment for everyone to wake up and be like, oh, so we actually have to pay attention to how we feel. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. So, because for you, it affected you, I feel like, in a very different way because it's like fitness and teaching. So it's like both of them were taken away because gyms were closed.
Oh my gosh. I was so depressed when the gyms were closed. I was like, no, this can't be. I was so shocked that this was happening. I was like, nah, I don't know what I'm going to do. That was me.
Did you think that like after like 2 weeks that everything would be open again?
Yo,
that's how I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to lie. I was like, yo, after 2 weeks, we're good. We're going back to school. We was home for like 4 or 5 months.
I was hoping it wouldn't. I was like, I was so happy to be home. I didn't do nothing. I was chilling. I was going outside regardless.
No, man. I was like, no, I don't like to be home. I like to be like active. And so when they closed the gym, I was so sad. Actually, I got really, really sick on Valentine's Day before we shut down. And it was it was so bad that I had trouble breathing. And nobody knew about COVID. It was Valentine's Day. We still had like 3 weeks before we shut down. And I was leaving the gym when I was with my friend at the moment. And I told her, and we were supposed to go eat. And I was like, okay, let's go. We drove. And we're driving to the spot. And I start feeling cold. And I'm like, all right, it's cold outside, whatever. We get food. And then I'm in the car and I start shivering. And I'm like, nah, what is happening? I couldn't even eat. That's how I knew that I was not okay. I could not eat. And so I got really sick. It was so bad that I was actually, I think I did go to the hospital because my breathing, I had like shortness of breath. Whatever. I was sick for 2 weeks. And then COVID happens. But I didn't know. I was like, oh, that was that COVID? Like, and then the gym's closed. And I remember, this is so funny. I met actually a guy at the gym on Valentine's Day. And we started talking. And he actually became the person that I would work out with every single day during COVID. We would go to the park, work out. He'd go home. I go home, and I worked. Then after work, I would go on a 3-hour walk. Especially when it got nicer. Oh, forget it. It was 2 a days. 2 a days for months. And I feel like that was the moment where I was like, okay, it's time for me to become consistent. Because before that, I was up and down. I had injuries. I had like a tear in my knee at some point, and that made me lose a lot of time. And then after COVID, I was like, oh, this is actually what I want to do, like, all the time now. And, that was COVID for me. COVID was also realizing that I didn't have to be in the gym to work out. I didn't have to lift weights all the time. It was like that moment where I realized I could do so many other things and still maintain a healthy lifestyle. But yeah, that was so sad when they closed the gym.
So you heard it here first. After Arlet went to the gym, everything closed, so she started COVID.
The root cause of COVID.
Yo, listen. Oh my gosh, that was crazy. That was so crazy how everything just happened in one day. I met somebody at the gym. I got sick, and then COVID happened, and then I had a workout buddy for like 6 months, and then life happens, and you just stop talking to people.
Wait, you don't talk to them anymore at all?
No, it was just like temporary.
So you just use them for a gym partner?
I didn't use him. Okay, I didn't use him. It was a mutual understanding. But yeah, it was like things happen for a reason, and so I feel like he was in my life for that period of time in order for me to like be consistent and just like understand that this is what I wanted to do. Yeah.
So, to pivot back a little bit to the DOE, and then we'll end it from there. What are some things that the DOE can do moving forward?
Oh my goodness. You got 10 hours to talk?
Go right ahead. Call them out.
I want to say that the number one thing I would do if I could make a change right now, today, is teaching the kids what they need to survive. Like real life situations. And just like going back to that idea that we want to create professionals and not robots. Because I feel like that's what we're putting out. I feel like we're putting out robots and juveniles, to be honest with you. Because like at the end of the day, the amount of personal connection that you can make is very limited. Because you're so busy, like, teaching them X, Y, and Z because you have to, right? Like, you have to get this in. You have to teach certain things by a certain date. Like, it's bizarre. And so it takes away from you connecting to them. And so we're putting out, this is what we're putting out into the world. And, these kids leave us, right? From my perspective as a middle schooler, you're leaving middle school without the skills as to how to maneuver in the real world. And so I feel like we need to be given the opportunity to teach kids how to do that, because it's getting to the point where, they're so naive and they're so like in the clouds that I don't know. This is very, very dark to say, but the dark times are coming. Like the next generations of professionals, I don't know what's gonna happen because it's just they're not getting what they need. And so I don't know, maybe that's very intense to say, and we might not see it in our lifetime. We might, but I say that, you know, nothing is getting better, and it all starts with education. I feel like education needs to be prioritized, and it's not.
Do you feel like it's starting from the curriculum? Does it start from the teachers, or is it something that's deeper in the system that needs a complete revamp of the DOE?
It's all of those things. It's everything together because they all go hand in hand. Like, I'm going to do a better job if you treat me right. If you put me in a position where I'm appreciated, you pay me more, like, hello. Pay me like I'm supposed to be executing that top of the line work that you want to see, right? Treat me that way. Treat me like you respect me, right? Teachers are not respected. Teachers are not respected from all ends. Teachers are not respected from the parents, admin, the district, the government, nobody. So I feel like, you know, teaching is so shitty, right? Teachers can be so shitty as people because we are being treated that way. And so you get what you give. And if, you know, if the majority of teachers are feeling like that, like, oh, whatever, like, this is just a show, then that's what you're going to get. And I know a lot of people that have just not given up, but have realized, like, you know, screw this. I'm not gonna kill myself. And I always say, I'd be like, oh, you want to give me 6 figures? Great. I'll stay an extra 5 hours and do this. But that's the difference, right? And so when you have people that care, when you have teachers that care, everything changes, right? It's a domino effect. You have teachers that care, you have more effort, you have kids that see that, right? Kids act on that. Kids see that and they start to care more. When teachers don't care, kids don't care, right? It reflects on how you move, your body language, how you speak. So all of those things that you mentioned go hand in hand. And I feel like it all needs to change. There needs to be like a whole like revamp in the DOE for sure.
Yeah. Do you think the first thing that they would have to do is start with the salary? Do you feel like that's the first step? And then obviously the rest is like the curriculum and all that stuff.
No, if I had a bigger salary, I might have considered doing this for the rest of my life. But there's a cap, and teachers don't make that much. Even after like 10, 15 years, that's it, right? Like, why would you stay in a position that doesn't pay you for what you're doing? And I know teachers that go above and beyond, teachers that go home and work for hours on end, right? I don't know how teachers do it with kids. Like, I don't know how they go home and deal with the kids and then do this work on top of that. I don't know, but that's a completely different conversation to have.
Do you feel like because now you're a trainer, right?
Yeah, I do. I teach group fitness classes at a gym in Queens.
Do you feel like all the freedom that you have doing that has re-sparked your love for teaching?
Hell yeah. Oh my gosh, I have this conversation all the time. I feel like I'm more creative. It gets to the point, and I tell the girls this because it's an all-female gym. And I tell them, I'm like, guys, I literally created this workout like 2 minutes before class. And it's because like when I'm in that space, I'm like looking at everything that we have. I'm like, oh, we're going to do this, and this. And it's just easy. Like, it doesn't feel like a job. Like, I tell people, oh, yeah, I work from whatever hour to whatever. But it doesn't feel like I'm working. Yes, it's tiresome, right? I feel like people forget that even when you're doing something that you love, you get tired. Like, you're exhausting yourself. You're using your energy. And training is very hard, okay? It's very hard, but I don't look at it as a hard where I can't do it. I look at it as a hard that I love. Like, I love to do this because it challenges me. I can challenge other women to be better than what they thought they could ever be, you know? So it definitely has sparked, like, my love for teaching in a different environment.
Does it hit like all the chords that the DOE could never have, like in the example of everything that you can do now as a PT that you couldn't do in school?
Yeah, I feel like I'm teaching something that I'm super passionate about and that I'm very knowledgeable of because I've been doing this for years. Like I was an athlete in high school all 4 years. I was always in some kind of sport every single season. Go to school, practice, go home, and that was my day every day. And you know, throughout that experience, I was able to develop that discipline that has literally made me who I am today. Like I've carried that discipline from very young, and so that discipline, I look at it as how it translates to today, and it's so easy. It's so easy for me to be like, okay, I'm doing this every day. I'm eating this every day. I'm not gonna eat that, even though I just had like some freaking M&Ms. Your fault, by the way. You got all the snacks up in here. So I definitely I see that the fitness world has kind of pushed me back into the Arlet that I'm used to. Which has been crazy because I took on this job back in February. And I was thinking about it. I was like, yo, am I crazy for doing this and teaching at the same time? Because February is mid-year. So I decided to take on this job because I was looking ahead. I was thinking about like what was going to happen in June, what I felt like doing after the school year was over. So I took on the role of being a group fitness instructor, and I teach classes. And so I was teaching classes after school. And so I would go to school, I would teach kids all day, leave the school, go work out, right? With very limited time. I had to get it in before I taught and teach from 5 to 9. And basically I was working, I don't even know how many hours that is. Like,
Did you start at what time would you wake up?
I'll wake up at 4:30. 4:30.
What's that, 15, 16 hours?
And that was Monday through Thursday. Fridays, I would just work at the school, and that was it. Weekends, I still tried to fit in a life. I still tried to, like, get my life together, and it was hard. There were weekends where I didn't have anything in me to even move. But life goes on, right? And sometimes you just got to talk to yourself. I had so many moments where I was like literally talking to myself to get through because I didn't think I was going to survive that schedule. I was like, yo, why would I do that? Why would I put myself in a position to have this crazy schedule where I knew I was going to be exhausted every single day of my life? And it's because you have to see it. Like, you have to see that vision. You have to see it for yourself. And I had full faith that I was going to get through it. And I was going to just transition into the fitness world with this opportunity. And so I thought about it. I was like, yo, I cannot let this go. And so I'm here. What is it, 6 months later? And I'm still teaching at the gym. And I feel like I'm regaining who I used to be. And that is my goal with all this. Like, yeah, it's nice to be fit. Yeah, that's the cherry on top. Look good, great. But at the same time, my priority was to get my mind right and to get my own self back, because I felt it. You feel when you're not yourself. And I haven't been myself for a long time. And for me to say that now and not get emotional, because I used to talk about this, I'd be like that. And I used to just ball out. But now I'm like so confident in that this is what I have to do, that it's so easy for me to just like, be transparent with you about it. So if I ever have to like give advice about anything, it's just to go for it. Super cliche. But just go for it, because you don't know how you're going to feel like in the long run. Yeah, so that's how this fitness transition started.
It's kind of like how Juan said it, that he was like, when he went from not being busy to being busy every single day, he was like, it sucked because it was a lot of work, but I loved it in the end because it made me who I was.
Yep. Actually, you just reminded me, a few years back, I met this guy. He owns a restaurant. He owns like multiple businesses, and he's my age, right? Very well off. And I was like, yo, how'd you get here? And he told me he was like early 20s, he was working 7 days a week, just, you know, making money and saving and, you know, investing into his future. And now he's chilling. He's chilling. And I'm like, but that's the thing. Like, people don't understand that, like, it's going to get ugly. It gets ugly at the beginning for you to eventually see everything, your fruits, you know, coming into, like, what is supposed to actually happen. And so you just got to plant that seed. And yeah, some of them ain't going to flourish, but, you know, you just got to keep planting that seed until you see the fruits of your labor.
Mm. So what sparked that thing for fitness for you? Like, what is it that you gravitated so much towards fitness that, like, you loved it? Because I don't think so many people share the same passion that you do for fitness. I know I don't. I know he don't.
Yeah, I don't. I hate going to the gym. I hate it. I just like seeing the progress after a while. But if I could avoid being there for so long, I do.
Can I just drop my body off and let it do the work? No. First of all, I totally get that. And the first thing that I like to tell people is that I don't always want to work out. Like, before, you know, the majority of the time, I don't want to work out. I don't want to move my body. I'm tired and I don't want to do shit. But again, you have to have, like, the want. You have to have that discipline to be like, okay, whatever. Like, you start thinking about all the things that you can do. And I'm like, I start off by always feeling some type of gratitude for being able to move my body. Some people can't even get off the couch, right? And so I always start off with being grateful for being able to move. And then I'm like, okay, Arlet, you can move your body, you can work out, stop being a baby, get it done, right? And, you know, you do little things here and there to kind of push yourself. Like, I'm a huge fan of, like, you know how people do vision boards? Mm-hmm. I just try to have a picture everywhere of, like, what I see myself doing or how I see myself looking in a few years or whatever. And that kind of, like, for me, that helps. That doesn't help everybody. Because with fitness, it's not one size fits all. Especially because biologically, it's not a one size fits all. Whatever works for one person is not going to work for another. And I always emphasize that. But, you know, my passion for fitness comes from a lot of different directions. And so one of the things for me is that I've had several, I don't want to say complications, like health complications. I don't like that word. I want to say that I've experienced a lot of health issues in the past that have really motivated me to want to be in fitness and to prioritize that. Because I look at my family, we already know our family history. Like, I'm like, no, I don't want to go down that same path. And so we talk about always, like, what is it? Breaking the
curse.
I don't know if it's a curse.
Generational curse. Yeah,
like, you know, like, just making it so that you don't continue the same patterns that our families, our older generations have passed down onto us. And so health is one of them for me. And I look at my parents and, you know, I want better for my future generations. And so that is one of the most important things when it comes to my passion for fitness, is like, that also pushes me. When I don't want to work out, I'll be like, Arlet, you said that you wanted to be better with your health, and here you are making excuses again. And I'm like, okay, let me get up. But that for me is like what sparked it for me, because, you know, again, looking good physically is just a cherry on top. It's what comes with that journey. And so what came with that journey was my health getting better. I had some, like, heart issues years ago that, thank God, were rectified, and, like, I was able to continue my fitness journey. So there's that. And, you know, the discipline that comes with the journey, I love that. I love being disciplined. Like, it's one of the things that I boast about because it's hard. It's hard to be disciplined, especially when you got people, oh no, let's go do this. Let's go out here. Let's eat this. And then when you got your meals and you're like, I don't want to go out to eat. And then sometimes you actually do. Um, sometimes I cave. But it's like, it's such a beautiful journey, and you get to learn so much about yourself and like what you're capable of. Because, you know, I didn't think that I would be able to be in this position years ago. And so, you know, you ever see that meme like, oh, you're where you prayed you wanted to be years ago, like be grateful, whatever.
3-year-old me would be so cool, would think my 20-year-old son
right,
is so cool.
Right. So I feel like it takes a lot of work for that spark that you're asking me about. It's just not like, oh, I wake up like, okay, let's work out. I wake up and it's like, oh my God, I need to get up now. I need to go make coffee, because without coffee, I'm the worst person ever and I can't work out. But it's like a process at the end of the day. It's not like it just happens. However, when you practice it consistently, it does become something that just happens. With, you know, the bad days, the bad mornings, but it just becomes so consistent, and it's like second nature. But you gotta go through that ugly. You gotta go through that dark little journey at the beginning to get you to, you know, the good days.
Has fitness played a role in your life moving forward? Like, what are some of the new goals that you have for personal training and all that? So, like, what are the things in the future that you're looking to achieve through that?
I think those opportunities are endless. I feel like I'm finally noticing the potential that I have, because, you know, being a teacher kept me in this box where I was like, oh, this is the only thing that I can do. And now in fitness, I'm realizing that there are so many different directions that I can go in. And so, you know, there's the classes that I teach have been great so far. I get to talk to women every day. I get to talk to women about health. I get to talk to women about like personal issues. I get to help women through those personal issues through fitness. And it's like, wow, this is everything I wanted to ever do. And so now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I would love to open my own facility one day. I would love to, like, you know, pursue the personal training aspect of things, like where I take like smaller groups, one-on-one training. And I just, you know, eventually, and I have thought about this, I would love to connect it back into education at some point. I used to teach this elective throughout the school year. It's called circuit training, where I taught the kids how to work out, basically. And it was amazing. The kids loved it. Okay, it's so funny because the next day after the elective, the kids would come up to me, Mr. Ryan, my legs, I can't feel it. I can't go up the stairs. And I'm like, is that a good thing? And they're like, yeah, it's a good thing. But, you know, I feel like it's one of the things that the DOE is missing, is like having the physical component where, and I know it's been taken away from so many schools because of budgeting and all that stuff. So eventually, like, not only for me, but I would love to bring fitness back into schools, especially in like our neighborhoods. Like, I feel like our kids need that, and they love that stuff. They love moving around. They love learning, like, you know, how to do things. And so eventually I would like to have like this, maybe a non-for-profit, have an organization where you know, they work with schools to basically have fitness programs back into the, not just the DOE either. It could be like wherever that high need is, but like I would love to come back here because this is where I grew up, and this is, you know, even though I did live in Sunset, I feel like my childhood was here in East New York and Cypress Hills. So eventually I would like to come back and give back in that way. Yeah.
So would you ever go back to the DOE if you ever had the chance?
You know, they say you could never say never, right? But because you don't know. You don't know what life decides to bring. I might have to go back one day if I absolutely have to, because I have to survive. I'll do it, right? But the plan is not to, because I already see that this is where I want to be, and I want to make this the thing that helps me throughout the rest of my life, right? I don't want to have to go back because I have to survive. Like, no, that's crazy. That's going back into the toxicity that got me here in the first place. So, one thing about me is I don't want to repeat patterns. I want to change, and I want to get better. So, to answer your question, no.
Not even if like there was to change their entire system?
Really? Honestly, I'm not even thinking about that, because if it happens, we're not going to be alive for it. To be honest with you, everything is so archaic, and I feel like it's so set in stone because people don't want to change. But if it does, that's great, because at the end of the day, like, I feel like the ones that will feel it the most are the kids, right? And I feel like it's such a crime to like have kids go through what they're going through now. And so hopefully there will be some kind of change in the future, for the sake of the kids.
What advice do you have for them now?
For who?
The kids.
The kids?
Students growing up.
Like, let's say they was to see this when they're like 15 or something. They're like, oh my God, that was my teacher from middle school.
Advice. Let's see. I would say, do what you love the most, right? They say that doing what you love doesn't bring money, but it's not always about money. That's my thing, because you could, I know people that have it all and are still in limbo as to how they feel about themselves and how they feel about what they do. And so I say, trust your gut. Trust your gut. Do what you think is right for you, because I feel like, especially us growing up, we were very influenced by our parents. And I feel like a lot of our creativity was limited because, it was just about surviving, because that's how they were raised. They were raised on just surviving. And that's how they raised us. Like, yo, you gonna work, you're gonna go to school, you're gonna just do what you gotta do. And that's it. There was no in between. There was never any like, oh, but focus on your mental health. Oh, but try to do what you love. Oh, but, there was never that kind of conversation happening. Not to blame our parents at all, because they did the best they could with what they had and what they knew. And so, with that being said, I feel like I'm going to tell them to do what our parents wouldn't tell us. Like, focus on you. As simple and basic as that may sound, like, focus on what you truly love to do. Even if that doesn't mean going to school, or, always invest in what you love to do, right? Because school's not for everybody. I understand that. But I always do say, even if you don't go that route, invest in something. Invest in a passion, because you're not going to sit here and not do anything, right? We can't do that. We can't afford that in New York, at least. But I always say invest in whatever it is that you truly believe in, and just go full force and have faith.
So who supported, like, your push to change the career path? Any people that you would want to shout out real quick?
Well, first of all, one of my best friends, her name's Darlise. She's also into fitness, and she was always very supportive of anything I did. So shout out to her. My family, I feel like a lot of my cousins do now understand how much I love this realm, and they're very supportive. So shout out to my cousins. Who else? It took a while to get my parents on board. It took a while because they're very traditional, and they were like, oh, you're gonna leave teaching? What are you gonna do? You're gonna do fitness? Like, what is that? Like, but I feel like they also experienced my lows, And they understood. They were like, okay, I think she needs to change what she's doing, because even my dad one day came up to me. It's so cute. He was like, if you want to quit today, you can. This is like a random day. I was cooking, and he comes up to me, and he was like, if you want to quit, just quit. And I was like, okay, but I can't. So we're gonna finish the year. Don't worry. So I feel like, parents always know. They see you every day. They know what's up. So I feel like once they realized that it was affecting me, that's when they got on board. Because at the end of the day, they just want the best for you. So, still shout out to them, because I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be able to be the person I am without them. So, yeah, I feel like more or less. Oh, and the women that I teach, they're great. They make this job easy and hard sometimes, but I love them either way. So, yeah.
Alrighty.
That was great.
That was a good episode.
That was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Alrighty.
Want to end it off for?
This has been the K and A podcast.
You gotta wait for it.
All right, bro. Cut the episode. See you later.